This is Marlene with Miami Ghost Chronicles, and I want to welcome you to another episode of Stories of the Supernatural. Wherever you find us, whether it's a video or podcast on your favorite platform, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. You can also find us on major social media platforms. If you go to miamighostchronicles.com, you can find links to the videos or MP3 files, which you can download and enjoy without commercial interruptions. If you're into classic horror, ghost, and adventure stories, I narrate Nightshade Diary, and you can find links at nightshadediary.com. If scary stories are your bag, and listening to encounters with cryptids, ghosts, dogman, and other weird creatures sends a shiver up your spine, then go to supernaturalstorytime.com for links to our weekly podcasts. Noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird can be found at eerie.news or visit the Stranger Than Fiction Stories tab at miamighostchronicles.com. Please subscribe to my newsletter on Substack. Just go to mppellicer.com for a link. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. So, how's everybody doing? Good, I hope. Everything is good on this end. Well, let me do my 10 seconds of complaining about the brutal hot weather. No, it is. It's really, you know what? I'm not a sweaty person. There's people that sweat, perspire for like any. I'm not one of these people. I mean, if you see me sweat, it's like, and I, I, it's like I feel sometimes like my eyeballs are sweating when I go outside. That for me, that's a lot, I guess is my point. It's like brutal. I mean, like, you know how you see sometimes people, oh, they're sweating and you don't have to wear it. It's like, I feel like that's like, I was never like this. And it's like, man, I'm sweating. I'm sweating into my eyes. It's like, that's an uncommon thing. But that to me, it's hot. And you know what? I don't know. I've always been a weather wimp, but it's just like, as a matter of fact, it's really funny because, um, a lot of this it's either raining because or it's so hot that you don't want to go outside and do anything. All right, like mow the lawn. So it's like any excuse to stay inside the AC. And then I think, wait, you know what? Once upon a time there was no AC. There was a fan. We were lucky, and people survived. People lived. But like I said, I've become a weather wimp. But yeah, besides that, everything is fine. Um, Everybody's asked me. All my chickens are doing good. My guineas, they're there. I've had some with incubators and I've sold them off because those guineas, they're something else. As a matter of fact, my neighbors say, oh, I love to see them running across your property. And it's like, yeah, those little, yeah, I'm not going to say what they are. But yeah, because they're great. They're wonderful to have. But every once in a while, they'll just go over the fence and it's like, here we go. So you see me like doing like a guinea rodeo outside my fence line. So, but anyway. They thrive, I'll tell you this much. They walk around no matter if it's raining, if it's hot, if it's cold, if it's lightning is striking, nothing. Everything is good with them. Also, I wanted you know how I always talk about all these new what do you call it? Uh that we get all these news that sometimes I tell them, how now even the weather I get now it's, Arctic blast in the winter or, the hot temperatures, which, on the phone you get constantly blasted on that. But, you know, I wanted to show you this and you might think, oh, here it is. This is a this is an article that was just published a couple of days ago on on a Gizmodo, and it's titled "Sleeping Giant Fault Under Canada Shows Major Earthquake." And I had to read it because it was like, okay, there's a bunch of. Let me see if I can get rid of this. No, not this one. No, Mm-mm. Get out of here. Hey, and you get out of here. And you, here we go. All right. Anyway, and I read it because we've had all these earthquakes and volcanoes and everything, and I'm like, man, you know what? What else? Now Canada. Then I'm reading into it, and it's saying after 12 millennia of relative inactivity. I'm like, wait a minute, 12 millennia? That's a thousand. That's 12,000 years. Anyway, the article, It's interesting. It's talking about there's a geologic fault that stretches across Yukon and Alaska that now appears capable of producing a major earthquake. And this is according to a new study. Now, this is called the Tintina Fault, and it runs about 620 miles from northeast British Columbia through the Yukon and Alaska. And it's remained quiet for the last 40 million years. And I was like, what? And the reason I guess what I'm saying, I understand they're trying to say, hey, this might thing might blow, but this thing has not done anything for millions of years. Let me see. Anyway, they're, like everything now, they're using high resolution topographic data, and the researchers identified an 81-mile long segment of the Tintina that produced multiple large earthquakes far more recently. How recent, you may ask? The last one occurred about 12,000 years ago, and stress has been building on the fault ever since. And you know what? I think this is really interesting. But like I said, I looked at that and I was like, earthquake, oh my God, this is imminent, or this is about to happen, or, like a volcano that maybe has become active and maybe is spewing smoke or lava or something like that. No, this is 12,000 years old. I guess my point is maybe there's people out there that think this is really interesting, but again, I guess my point is that sometimes I think that we get too much information that puts us like at, oh my God, and this is one of those. And hopefully not, because God knows um, we don't need anything like this, to be honest with you. Like, why, to worry about, because even now, when they had this last earthquake that they evacuated Hawaii and, well, basically anything along the Pacific coast, tsunami, everybody's thinking of what happened in Japan. What was it in 2011? And I'm thinking, oh my God, this is going to be horrible. And thankfully, it turned out not to be. Even I know parts of Southern California, everything. There was a bunch of places that along the coastline that told people either evacuate or go to higher ground. And it's like sometimes, I guess my point is that they over worry us. How's that? They over worry us because there's just some things that there's just no control over. Absolutely, earthquakes being one of them, and volcanoes being another. But something that has been dormant for thousands of years, it's like. Plus, by the way, and I read the article earlier. Basically, the main stretch of this is in the middle of nowhere, Canada. I think there's a little town out there that's like got like 1,500 people. All right, don't get me wrong, all life is precious, but it's not like this is running through a highly populated area where, there's thousands or millions could die. No. Or at least be, if not that, they would lose their home. I don't know. Tell me what you think. Because I know that a lot of people think that sometimes this is great, like when you get a flat tire or something like that, or an emergency. But there's times that, man, having too much information overloads us and makes us worry about stuff that we shouldn't be worrying about. There's other stuff more imminent that we should. And I don't know. Let me know what you guys think, especially about this thing with the earthquake. And I guess my question is, lately we've had, reports. This is the last few months. I'm not saying earthquakes, eruptions, tremors, this and that. And I think they've always been around, but all of a sudden we're getting all these reports, which makes us think, and I might be wrong about this, that we've been constantly, that something's about to blow. And I think a lot of these tremors have been happening all along. They just haven't been major, and just weren't covered as they are now. Now, don't get me wrong. That one that happened, the most recent one off the coast of Russia on that peninsula, that's a pretty significant tremor. But still, all right. I don't know. That's my 2 cents worth. I don't know. How's it? Over. I guess I'm saturated with this everything imminent kind of notification kind of deal. For what it's worth. But anyway, let me get on to the good part. The good part is who is our guest today here at Stories of the Supernatural. This is his first time here. His name is Bruce Olav Solheim. He was born in Seattle, Washington, to Norwegian immigrant parents. He's a disabled veteran. He served for 6 years in the U.S. Army as a jail guard in West Germany and later as a warrant officer, helicopter pilot at the 82nd Airborne Division. As a civilian, he worked as a defense contractor at Boeing for 5 years, then went on to earn his PhD in history from Bowling Green State University in 1993, with his main field being U.S. foreign policy. Bruce was the first person in his family to go to college and is currently a distinguished professor of history at Citrus College in Glendora, California, where he has taught for 26 years. As a Fulbright professor and scholar, Dr. Solheim taught at the University of Tromsø in northern Norway in 2003. In 2001, he founded the veteran program at Citrus College, and in 2007 co-founded, along with Ginger Delvilla Rose and former East Los Angeles Vet Center director Manuel Martinez, the first in the nation college transition course for recently returned veterans called Boots to Books. A prolific writer, Bruce has published 11 books and written 10 plays, 6 of which have been produced in addition to his academic books. He has published several books about the paranormal. Since the age of 4, he has experienced angels, demons, ghosts, cryptids, telepathy, psychokinesis, mediumship, and alien contact. Boy, we're going to ask him about that. He recounts his experiences with high strangeness in his Timeless Trilogy books titled Timeless, Timeless Deja Vu, and Timeless Trinity, and a book about his contact with non-human intelligence. Wow, we got a lot to talk to him about. Alongside his list of published works, he's also published 2 comic book series, Snark. Issues 1 and 2 features an alien hybrid character of the same name, and Dr. Jekyll, Alien Hunter. Issues 1 and 2 with a female lead character. Bruce is married to Ginger and has 4 children, one serving in the U.S. Air Force and 2 grandsons. Help me welcome him. How are you doing today, Bruce? Oh, let me take you off mute. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's all right. Hello, thank you for having me on your show. And
On the contrary, it's fine.
Yeah, you brought up some really interesting things. I do worry about volcanoes. I grew up in Seattle.
Okay, yeah.
We had giant Mount Rainier looming the whole time, and we would have tourists or friends from Norway coming, or relatives from Norway coming to visit, and they'd say, "Oh, that's such a beautiful mountain." And I kind of look at things in a dark way sometimes. So I say, "It is beautiful, but when she blows, all this is gone. We're all
That's
gone."
it. It's the mountain of death.
Yeah. But you can't live like that. That's not living.
No, it's like Mordor, like.
But the thing, and then for a while, I was worried about meteorites because I read some article, and this is what happens if I read too much.
Yeah, see, that's what I'm talking about right there.
Yeah, I sympathized with you. So yeah, this lady, a meteorite went through the roof of her house.
Yeah, I heard that.
And I thought, oh my God, now I got to look up all the time. And
God doesn't like you, man. Somebody doesn't like you. You're getting picked up by the universe, man. If a meteorite hits, come and see it.
I know. So I understand what you were saying.
Well, no, earlier today I read this. Well, I just looked at the introduction, the little synopsis about that the meteor that they thought was going to hit Earth instead is going to hit. No, not a meteor. Is it a meteor or an asteroid? I don't know. It's going to hit the moon instead. And I'm like, okay, that'll be wonderful.
That's not going to do us any good either.
No, of course not. Of course not. It's like, no, that's just as catastrophic, I guess, or I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, when I read stuff like that, it's like, And you know what? The truth is, not a lot of people, sometimes because they bury this, not all the time, but they bury it sometimes further towards the body or the end of the article about what they're basing it on. And it's sometimes it's kind of flimsy a little bit.
Yeah.
Like, well, this sounds kind of
Yeah.
improbable, if anything.
Yeah. Maybe not. Yeah.
But you're hoping, because if not, it's like, where are you going to go?
Exactly.
But yeah, this thing about the I looked at it again because I said, oh my God, man, what other places got? And then it's like, that's 12,000 years ago was the last thing they had the tremor. It's like, come on. And like I said, this is in the middle of nowhere in Canada with maybe like one of these little towns. Canada is so vast.
Yeah.
And there's just areas out there that there's just forest.
Yeah. Spread out. The people are spread out, except for, they're very much in the southern part of Canada and
right.
highly dense,
Yeah.
city areas, and then the rest of it's just spread out everywhere.
Yeah, but this is like from
Very,
what I was looking
yeah,
at the fault, like this tin thing.
yeah,
It's in the middle. It's not towards where,
yeah,
they have all these cities and stuff. And I was like, you know what, I'm not gonna read this anymore because
yeah.
basically, like, I kind of do like what you just described. I start thinking, oh my God,
Hmm.
an earthquake. And people don't realize that, you have volcanoes and you have earthquakes, two different things in a way. I mean, one
Hmm.
produces, but, and I've been hearing also same thing, that Yellowstone, that's supposed to be blowing and it doesn't, I think sometimes, they can only guesstimate sometimes up to a certain point
Yeah,
despite all the advances. But
yeah,
I think, as a matter of fact, most more people die because they fall into that hot water. They found a
yeah,
few people that have kind of like boiled. Some
yeah,
by accident and other, unfortunately, by on purpose kind of deal.
yeah, yeah.
But yeah.
That's true.
So anyway, you in the bios, it's described that you started having experiences since you were a kid. What happened with that?
Yeah, well, my first experience that I really remember was in northern Norway. We were visiting my grandmother on a remote island 200 miles above the Arctic Circle.
Oh,
And she lived in this little house, which I still own with the property. Nobody lives there. It's just like a haunted house right now, but it's a cool haunted house. So the
okay.
so my yeah, we were visiting and or we stayed there for 9 months, and I got really sick, and it was the winter time, and
Okay.
I got so sick so quick. I made it home with my little friends. They helped me. I was yeah four. I was probably five. Maybe I just turned five, and I got to the house, went into the kitchen. It's like a farm kitchen with a little day bed in it, because my
Mm-hmm.
grandmother was elderly and she sometimes couldn't make it up the steep stairs, so she'd just take a nap in the day bed. So I was
Mm-hmm.
lying down there, and of course it's the dark time that the sun doesn't come up for 3 months, so it's kind of spooky to
Wow.
begin with, and in those northern latitudes, and I was crying and I couldn't move my head, I couldn't move my limbs, I was like almost paralyzed, and I had a high fever. And the neighbors who were our relatives all came in and said, "Oh no, this is what happened when so and so got polio.
Oh
This
my
is what
God.
happened." So they're scaring my parents and my grandma to death.
Mm-hmm.
And I just cry myself to sleep. And then everybody kind of left the kitchen, went had coffee or something in the living room, and then I woke up and I saw this light in the beams of this old farm kitchen, and it was very warm, and I just felt like everything was going to be okay. I can't really say there wasn't like necessarily a human figure or some kind of, it was just a warm light, that like a healing light, and I felt it took
Okay.
away all my pain, everything. I just was I felt fine, and I must have drifted off back to sleep. And then when I woke up, my grandmother and my mother were in the kitchen, and I jumped out of bed and started running around, and they said, "Oh my gosh, it's a miracle."
Wow.
And
Yeah.
I told them, I saw this light. A 5-year-old kid, they don't know. It's a light, and then I felt better, and I fell asleep, and now I'm okay. And my both my mom and my grandmother said it was your guardian angel that
Okay.
saved you, that rescued you. And I took it for what they said. I'd say, "Oh,
Right.
guardian angel." And I was a Lutheran school kid, going to our Sunday school, and I just believe that's what it was. I know it's something different now, but at the time, what it did, though, more importantly, what it did is it opened the aperture. It opened this window to another world that that I then it became normal for me. So the paranormal became normal, and I started
Right.
having experiences all the time. And luckily, I had my mother who was also having experiences.
Okay.
She was a very good psychic. She taught me how to
Really?
read
Wow.
cards, just the regular playing cards that
Mm-hmm.
we would send and
Right.
receive. And she taught me, and made my dad nervous. He didn't like it, so he'd make us put the cards away. But when he was gone, we would do it again. So and then she taught me other things. She said, "There's a time to talk about this, and there's a time not to." in other words, situational awareness. So when I went to school and I was talking about all these people, my invisible playmates, invisible to other people, but not to me,
Right.
and telepathy and all that, and the teacher said, we don't talk about that at school. That's not real. You better talk to your parents about that because you're not allowed to. So I went home, I was crying, and my mom said, it's okay. Just some people, you're not going to be able to talk to everybody about this. Not everybody wants to talk about it or has these experiences or acknowledges it. So I learned very quickly that I kind of had to keep it quiet.
Right.
Unfortunately, because kids are so psychic and so in tune, and then they
Yes.
kind of, the school system oppresses, just kind of knocks it
Yeah.
out of them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so
Exactly.
unfortunate. And but I kept it alive because of my mother.
Yeah.
She just taught me how to use it, and how to do, when to use it, more important, how to turn it off, how to turn it on, that kind of stuff, which
Yeah. A
is the
lot of
most.
parents
Yeah.
they want when they have the kid having they quiet them down, not so much because maybe they don't believe it, but because they don't want their kid to be looked at. You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
They do it like
Yeah.
trying to protect your child,
Yeah.
like saying, "Oh no, 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 don't talk about." Yeah, at least you had your mom
Yeah.
who helped you cultivate it, but just told you, "Look, you have
Yeah.
to only speak at certain times about this."
Yeah. Keep it under wraps.
Yeah, yeah.
So that
So
and yeah, so that's
go ahead.
where it started, and then I just kept having frequent, random and frequent experiences throughout my life. Continuing to this day. I mean, now I manage them. I don't ever say I control it, because that's presumptuous. To say you can control all this stuff. I just say I manage it pretty effectively, and I've learned how to do what I call spirit walks and make these connections. And other times I just put it on ignore or turn it off, and just,
Yes. So
so
in
you
other
have
words,
to.
I take it that
Yeah.
after you left your grandmother's house, you still continue with these experiences.
Yeah. Yeah. That started at lifelong experiences. Everything that you mentioned in the bio there. I mean, I've
Hmm.
experienced all that stuff, all the high strangeness, and learning how to use it, judiciously, ethically is very important. And I think children should be taught that if they have these abilities, which I think all
Sure.
of them do, some
Yeah,
more to agree than others. You need to be taught early on how to be ethical with it and not use it in a manipulative way, because
sure.
people who do have a lot of these gifts don't use them that way.
Oh
They
no.
and it's yeah, it's very scary sometimes when I meet somebody who I know has a dark aura, and I go, that person's, they got a lot going on there, but they're not using it for anything good. I can
Let me
just
ask
tell.
you,
Yeah.
because obviously you can see, do you see auras then? Or do you
I
see,
can, not all the time, but I
okay.
do. If I focus on it, yeah. I mean, that's not necessarily my specialty.
Hmm.
I have more of the audio, and like when I connect with spirits, I hear their voices. Sometimes I see their. It's a weird thing. I see their like handwriting. I'll
Really?
ask them a question, and
Hmm.
and it might be a yes or no question, and I'll see, and it's usually in script. It's
Okay.
like cursive, right?
Right.
Which they don't teach in schools anymore. But
I know. I know.
and it's golden. It's really cool because it's golden cursive, and that's
Really
how that.
interesting.
Yeah. But sometimes I have the visual too, and I do see things, but
The reason
yeah,
why I asked you if you had ever seen, because you said that thing about the dark auras,
yeah.
seen any spiritual attachment to anybody's aura? I mean, besides, let's say, the dark coloring.
I haven't like seen like what the entity is, be able to
Hmm.
identify it. No, I haven't.
Right.
I haven't been able to do that. I just get an innate feeling that there is
Okay.
something wrong, and
Okay.
and part of that comes from survival. From I worked in a prison in Germany,
Oh
and
my God,
later,
yes.
and I worked in a maximum security prison. So I guarded a person on death row. I guarded mass murderers,
I was gonna
and
say that must
yeah,
have been people with a lot of
yeah.
darkness around them, for lack of a better word.
Yes, and it mainly manifests in their eyes, which I focused on. That to
How
me,
so?
yeah.
What would you?
Well, the mass murderers that because I'd have to frisk search them, so I was actually
Okay.
right on them, touching them and
Hmm.
frisking them, and I would look into their eyes, and I would see like a deep bottomless well. That's what it looked like to me. With no, I felt like there was nothing there, no spark,
Yes.
and it may be, maybe they never had it, or maybe it was taken away from them. I don't know, but I know what they did, probably as a result. And the other thing I noticed, and they could be very charming, which is
Mm-hmm.
scary. Ted Bundy
Yes.
apparently was very charming, especially
Yeah.
to ladies, but um, he was very charming. But they can the switch is so quick that they can go from being charming and very polite and nice to murderous and homicidal just in a blink of an eye, and they wouldn't
Right.
feel it either way. It doesn't really matter to them. They don't feel it. So
Yeah, they
and
put this facade, and that's how they make some of
yes,
these victims trust them, and
yes,
maybe go places that you're thinking, this is person really you really don't know because they
and
have that. What's the word I'm looking for? That wholesome look.
some of them do. Yeah, they look like something they're not, and they can.
Oh
But
yeah.
but if you look in their eyes, even if you can't see a darker aura, if they can mask that somehow, they can't
Mm-hmm.
disguise their eyes. That's where you can tell. And that from what I learned, and also, and it's not always true, but I noticed that a lot of the mass murderers, some of the most heinous crimes, they had demonic tattoos as well, which is not
Yes.
unusual for people in prison, but not all of
Mm-hmm.
them have, necessarily mass murderers. But it certainly
Yes.
is an open invitation to
For sure.
attachments to,
Absolutely.
bad things. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was touring one time that prison in Moundsville in Virginia,
Hmm.
and it's empty. And you look at 'em, I mean, these cells are like so small. And I was looking, and most of these guys, they've written stuff for like
Hmm.
scraped off,
Yeah.
almost all the cells. If you, I mean, and it's like floor to ceiling. Most of them, I would say, have some type of demonic
Hmm.
or some type of dark either inscription or writing or
Yeah.
most drawings. Some of them are really crude,
Hmm.
but a lot of them had that in most of the cells that I walked in.
Yeah. They have. I heard a counselor once say this. He was trying to help people, and he said, you know, I don't think necessarily you're bad people, but you've made very bad decisions and you've told yourself you're bad. So you just keep layering it on top, whether it's the tattoos or the violent actions or just giving
Hmm.
in to all that. At a certain point, you make a decision. And that's what I always told prisoners who were trying to, try to play me as a guard. They always try it. They're very good amateur psychologists.
Oh yeah.
They'll try to get you, find out what your weakness is, and then you exploit that. And they would tell, yeah, I had a really bad childhood, and I was beaten, and I was sexually abused. And I said, I'm really sorry that happened to you, but I know a lot of people who that happened to, and they didn't go and murder somebody. They didn't rape
Right.
people. So at a certain point, you made a decision. Now, maybe
Sure.
you think you're a bad person and you just keep making, but you can stop right now. You can consider yourself, just say, I'm going to wipe this slate clean and make better decisions and, pay your debt to society. And some of them do. Some of them do. They seek redemption, but most of them don't. And the recidivism rate is so high. It's like
Oh yeah.
75, 80%. And
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's not a good place for a sensitive person to work in a
I
prison.
was going to say
Yeah,
you must have been
terrible.
like,
It was
and the thing
terrible.
is that I want to say sometimes it's attachments. I want to say
Mhm.
other times they're psychopathic or sociopathic. And
Mhm.
I think sometimes, especially when it comes to killing people,
Yeah.
I think sometimes on some level it feeds their soul, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
There's something about it that they just can't deny themselves.
Yeah.
Because yeah, they just there's something that uh, like you said, and sometimes they've looked at some serial killers where, like you
Mhm.
said, you expect they had horrific childhoods, and some of them,
Yeah.
not all of them did.
No,
Some of
that's
them were
true.
were like kind of like normal in a way, and
Yeah.
just so yeah. But
Ab-
yeah, I've heard that they try to play people, and after a
oh
while,
yeah.
they get to know, oh, because everybody expects, oh my God, no wonder that you were killing people because you were this and this was done to
Pe-
you.
people get fooled by it all the time. I see celebrities that want to do good. They'll go into
Mm-hmm.
prisons and they'll say, "Oh, these poor people." And okay, I sympathize with, but I also know the reality of it too.
Sure.
And you're getting played. Just so if they asked me, they'll never ask me, but if they did, I
Uh-huh.
just said, be very careful.
Yeah.
Be very, very careful because there's a lot of forces at work here, and in
Yes.
general, their IQs are much higher than people think.
Right.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes. And sometimes some people, how's this? Sometimes people mistake poor academic
Hmm.
achievement with non-intelligence. And
Right.
that's far from it. That
Yeah.
person might have little schooling, as in went to
Hmm.
school or dropped out when, God, maybe
Hmm.
when they were 14 or 15.
Hmm.
That has nothing to do with how intelligent they are. And
Right.
sometimes they're really intelligent and they're very street smart.
Yeah.
And even if they dropped out in ninth grade, they're
Yeah.
still like sharp as a tack. As a matter of fact, sometimes
Yeah.
sharper than you want them to be because either they had to live by their wits, but exactly like what you said, and they're very, very good at manipulation
And
of,
yeah, yeah. I remember in the commandant's office, I was in there getting something. I don't know what it was at the prison in Mannheim, West Germany, and he had a flip chart there, and it said the average GT score is the Army's way of measuring IQ. So the
mm-hmm.
average GT score for the prisoner versus the average GT scored of the guard, and the prisoner's average GT score was like 10 or 15 points higher
Yeah.
than the guards. So yeah, they're not dumb.
No,
Uh,
they're not.
they're just very good, adept at survival, and very can be very manipulative, and use it for and some of them do have psychic ability too, which are probably the ones that are the most twisted when they go down that route. It always
Sure.
remind. I hate to use the Star Wars thing, but it really the dark side of the Force versus the
Yeah.
light. I mean, it's you make a decision, and the dark side is always
Yeah.
easier. It's always
Oh, of
easier.
course.
It's
It's
just
very you want to be powerful. You want to
it's
be like
alluring. It's very alluring, it's but it you pay a heavy price for that, and it just the price keeps getting heavier and heavier, and
well, you know what? I think a lot of people also make the mistake, Bruce, of thinking that psychics are enlightened people. In other words, if you're
yeah.
psychic, and I don't know if you ever saw this, I'm going to go to use Hollywood as a because everybody understands. There's
Yeah.
a movie based on a Stephen King novel called Rose Red. It's about, as a matter of fact, it's based on an supposedly an old house in Seattle that basically comes alive. One of those deals. But anyway, part
Hmm.
of the story is that they bring in a group of psychics. You know, the
Hmm.
house has this very bad reputation. People have gone in there and disappeared. Of all these psychics that they're brought in there because they're psychic, this is one guy who's a real jerk, and I loved it because it
Hmm.
was like everybody thinks that if you're psychic, you're enlightened, and you're not. You know, you're a jerk. And this guy who was very psychic,
Hmm.
but he was obnoxious as all get out.
Yeah.
And and he was part of the, and I'm sure people that know about that movie will know which one I'm talking about. Um, that one thing has nothing to do with the other. Sometimes you can be very,
Right.
very psychic and use it, like you said, to like manipulate people or
Yeah.
gain the whatever it is that you're doing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, yeah,
Exactly.
yes,
And it's a gift, and it's meant for us to do good with it, to do the best we can. Obviously make mistakes here and there, but and that's the way I look at it. And like for instance, one of my friends is Lynn Buchanan. He was in
mm-hmm.
Operation Stargate. I'm not sure if you've ever.
Yes,
Uh,
I spoke to Lynn like 2 weeks ago.
oh, that's cool. Yeah, he is such a nice guy, and
Yes,
he probably told you the story of when he decided not to do what he was doing for the military anymore.
yes,
And it's a very sad story, but the thing is, he's dedicated his life to teaching people and to finding missing persons, missing children
right.
in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And what a noble thing to do,
Sure.
rather than finding targets,
Right, right.
for the military, and you're being used for those targets, and more than likely you are. So,
Oh yeah,
but
right.
there's a very practical use, for this, rather than entertainment or whatever, which is fine. I think it is entertaining, but the like what he did at Stargate, I do have I call it assisted remote viewing, because I
Mm-hmm.
use my, I know you mentioned my NHI. my
Mm.
non-human intelligence. I don't do it alone. I don't claim, oh, I'm this great, I can do remote viewing. I call it assisted remote viewing. So I asked for help and I put
Okay.
it to practical use. I don't know if you remember, I think it was in upstate New York. There was a little girl missing a couple of years ago, and
Okay.
she was at a state park or something, and she went
Uh,
missing. And it
Okay.
was at a campground, right? I just can't remember the name of the place, but
Okay.
and uh, and so she went missing, and everybody's looking for her. So I said I asked my NHI, whose name is Anzar, by the way, and I
Okay.
asked, can you help me zero in? Where is this girl? What is she seeing? What's so I had a very clear picture that she was still alive, which was very
Mm-hmm.
good, but she was in this dark, like a I considered a cupboard or a like a under a staircase or in an enclosed dark space. That's what I
Okay.
saw, but she was okay, and I kind of had a general location. So I decided, I'm not an official, you know, psychic or whatever. I don't do it for a living or whatever. But
Mm-hmm.
I contacted the police department because they had a tip line, and they
Okay.
probably get a lot of psychics calling in. But I called in. I
Mm-hmm.
said, hey, this is what I see. This is what I think is happening, and I never heard back. It just probably
Right.
went into their plethora of things they get. But
Right.
as it turned out, she was alive and she was in a trailer, in a
Ah,
like a closet, in a trailer, and it was very close to the place, probably within 10 miles or 5 or 10 miles from where I
wow.
thought it
But
was.
was she,
Yeah.
had somebody put her there or she had gone
Yeah,
there? What?
the kidnapper, a guy,
They kidnapped her.
yeah,
Oh
they
God.
kidnapped her. Yeah, it was a loner kind of thing. I think his trailer was on his mother's property, and he was like
Mm-hmm.
a ne'er do well kind of person, bumming around. And anyway,
Yes.
I apparently I don't know if I never got the details if she was hurt
But that,
during that because
wow. Right. Right. That's like
you know,
verification without, you
yeah,
know,
and nobody
very.
acknowledged it or anything. So then, and then another case of it, I have some friends that work in different in I'll just say one of the three-letter agencies. That I have
Okay.
some military people that work in there because I'm ex-military, former military. So I said, I think I could help with certain things. Like I was really concerned about the American hostage, well, all the hostages in Gaza, but and all the
Mm-hmm.
innocent people, obviously, hostages, because it's easier
Sure.
if you could narrowly focus on one or just a couple people. So I
Of
focused on the
course.
three: uh, Eden Alexander, Sagi Deklechen, and what was the older gentleman's name? Keith Siegel. So those were the three. So I was looking at a map and I asked Anzar to help me. Where are they in general? So I was like, kind of like dowsing, but I was on a map and okay, they're here. I
Mm-hmm.
think they're here. I got the grid coordinates. I zoomed in on Google Earth and I got, oh, there's some interesting buildings there. And so I identified all that stuff. And then I was able to connect to them through my NHI contact
Okay.
and describe where they were, what it looked like, who was around them, what were the people
Okay.
doing, how were they being treated, what was their general health. So I took like I don't know 6 pages of notes, about this detailed information, and I put it out to my friend. I said, "Can you contact somebody? Just tell them I want to help. I feel so helpless, just watching the
All right.
news and seeing this day after day." I mean, the sooner all these people get out, the sooner maybe they can have peace there or whatever. I don't know. I just wanted
Sure.
to do something good,
Yep.
and so I next thing you know, and this was December of last year,
Okay.
and by the way, I never signed an NDA, and I don't have a current security clearance, so I'm free to talk about. I'm not going to mention any names necessarily, but so
Yeah, I know
just in
what you
case
mean.
somebody's listening and they're thinking, oh, he's, no. So I got a phone call, random phone call in December of last year, and this person said their name, and I could tell it was a false name. You can tell when people, yeah,
Yeah.
my name is Tom. Yeah, that's my name,
Yeah.
Tom.
Yeah.
No, it was something like that. And I said, oh, okay. And they said, yeah, we heard that you might have some information that would help us. And I said, well, who are you? And they said, well, we're with and I said, are you USG? Because if they're government, and usually if you say USG, they'll say, yeah, that's US government.
Right.
They didn't say which agency or whatever. And I said, okay, yeah, I do. And they said, well, we want to meet you. And I said, okay. that's great. I don't know who you are though, so I would need to see some ID because I don't want, this information is very sensitive, and I don't want to be giving
Right.
it to the others, the people
Right.
that
Like
are,
I don't know who you
yeah,
are. Yeah.
I don't, yeah. So they suggested like meeting at a coffee shop, and I said no. I no, I don't want to do it. It needs to be a secure location, meaning a skiff, a
Right.
special compartmentalized information facility, right? So
Uh-huh.
they suggested a federal building near where I live. Ended up being an FBI office, which is pretty
Okay.
secure. And I met them there. There was two of them. One of them, I can say that one of them was FBI. So they showed
Okay.
me their credentials. The other one, I looked at them, and they didn't show me any credentials, right? And then I knew. And then the person, the FBI agent goes, "Well, they don't usually show that to anybody
They're
unless
with
they
me,
have
you
to."
know? It's like,
Yeah, they're with me. I can vouch for this person. Yes,
you're
okay.
right, exactly.
And then I for an hour and a half, they grilled me about, and I told them I had already given the written report, and I did all that. So that was around the middle of January of this year, and about 2 weeks later, the first hostage came out. Uh,
Wow.
Keith Siegel came out, and then about 4 weeks later, the second hostage, Sagi Dekel Chen, came out, and then recently, the most recent one was Eden Alexander. He was the
Okay.
military guy, so he was the last one to come out. But I had detailed information on all of them, and then I told my friend who initially got me connected. I said they never got back to me. They said they were going to like send me at least like a thumbs up or thumbs down or something. Nothing. And then the phone number I had, it must have been a burner phone. It just
Sure.
disappeared. And I told him, and he laughed at me, and he said, "No, they don't. They don't acknowledge you unless you won't hear from them until they want some more
Right.
information."
Unless I call you back and go, hey, by the way,
Yeah,
what do you
yeah,
think about this? Yeah. They're
yeah. Don't
like,
call us. We'll call you. That kind of
right.
like a
Last thing
Hollywood
we want
agent.
to let this guy know is how good he is.
But I think I might have been a very small part. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that this can be. That's how you use this stuff for good. You save children like my friend Lynn Buchanan, or you teach people, good people, how to do this stuff, or you have a specific purpose that's somehow good. That's a good use of it. And the bottom line of it is that it's real. That's why
Yes.
I always say it's real, because some people think, oh, it can't be real, but
Well,
it is real. As you know, this is real stuff. But that means it's also a responsibility. To
well,
say
I
it's
think that a lot
real.
of times
Yeah.
the psychics, people think that they only use psychic like in cold cases. And
Right.
what you pointed out is very important, Bruce, which is sometimes at the very onset of a case,
Yep.
when somebody's missing and time is important,
Yes.
sometimes they need to know, should we be looking here or should we be looking
Right.
out here? They get,
Yeah.
in other words, being able to, even if they don't know us, you can't give them a specific. It's like, okay, this is what I see. It's like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe we're staying too close to where this person disappeared from.
Hmm.
We need to start looking outside of, you know, and of course, everybody knows, especially in that case where we're talking about children being abducted,
Yeah.
um, its time is of the essence as
Right.
far as how
Yeah.
quickly they can be found and
Yeah.
etc.
The quicker the
Yeah.
better. and
Oh,
and
sure.
and
Sure.
intelligence agencies, they use signal intelligence, human intelligence, and they use, even though the government claim, oh, we don't use remote viewing anymore. We proved that really wasn't reliable or whatever. That's, we all know that's not true. Of course they do.
Of
Why
course.
wouldn't
Yeah.
you? Why wouldn't you? And then
Right.
statistics
Exactly.
showed that it was very viable. And just talking to people like Lynn Buchanan or Joe McMoneagle or any of those people. And there was a lady too. She was very, very good, but you hardly ever hear about her. Now I forgot her name, but she used a very she didn't use the military coordinate remote viewing system.
Hmm.
She used what she called automatic writing,
Okay.
which is very cool, which is kind of similar to the non-traditional way I do it with my NHI. I
Okay.
don't, and automatic writing, obviously you're using something beyond just yourself, and you're not doing all these like grid coordinates and that stuff they do in the military. Everything has to be so regimented, and that works for some people.
Let me ask you, when you said you were dowsing on the map, were you
Yeah,
dowsing? Do you use a pendulum or what are you using as far as when you're dowsing over a
I
map?
I just use my finger. I
That's
was
it?
just, yeah, I was
Okay.
just, I mean, I could have used a raw, I think anything would work as long as
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you believe it and that you put your full faith into it, your
sure.
full, well, I should say, your attention and your intention into it, whether it's
Mm-hmm.
your finger or a stick, whatever.
Anything.
You can make that as your tool, and intention and attention and focused calm, and then and the imperative for me was, I want this whole thing to end. I want all these innocent people to stop dying. I want there to be peace, and the sooner we can get those people out, the better it'll be for everybody. And that's what I kept thinking. So I had this really powerful intention, and then my attention to detail was the map. And then, as I drilled down into that spot, I identified the grid coordinates. So that's when I got
Okay.
into the grid coordinates, and that's what I gave to these two people
And the
who,
reason why I asked
yeah,
is that I wasn't sure if they were keeping them all at the same location because sometimes
no,
they'll divvy them up and they'll send some over here and send some over there. So they were in separate locations,
yes, they
is
were
what
in
you're saying.
separate locations
All
and
right.
very different locations. And
Mm-hmm.
some of them were being hidden like they were hidden in a mosque for a while. They were
Okay.
in like an apartment building, like where regular people would live. One was in actually a UN building, which was very disconcerting because I'm not
Really?
anti-UN. I'm very big
Right.
supporter of the UN, but that and they get a bad rap, and not to, I mean, there's bad players everywhere in every
Right.
organization, but but anyway, that's another facility I and that would, what a good place to hide them. I mean, when you think
Yeah,
about
of
it,
course.
yeah, you
There's
could
nobody's gonna
behind
go looking there.
the facade, of the UN, it's, oh, we don't do that, but it only takes
No, of
one bad
course not.
apple. So
Yes, exactly.
and and
Exactly.
and it's so yeah, I was able to get a lot of detailed information, what the guards look like, and how the situation was changing. They were using less of the Hamas people and more of there's a lot of different subgroups, and a
Yes.
lot of them are younger, and they are a little bit more, well, some of them are more susceptible to suggestions. So the
Right.
dedicated Hamas guys are very hardcore. It's really, I was trying to tell them, please be nice. Realize that the sooner they get out, that maybe you guys can go hide somewhere, whatever. And I was just trying to convince them to be nice to the hostages. And I think for the younger guys, it was easier to do because they were really just wanting money. That's what they wanted.
Yeah, sometimes I hate to
They're like
say it,
hired
the
guns.
motivation is
Yeah,
something as basic as that. I mean,
yeah,
it's horrific, but
yeah.
if sometimes that it's like, yeah, we're gonna, this is so there's a scarcity of, in other words, this a scarcity of ways to
Hmm.
do what, make money just to
Yeah,
subsist. We're not talking here like luxury stuff.
yeah, and
Yeah, people will lend themselves over to do just a lot of
yeah,
things.
yeah, and yeah, and I had to be careful with that too because I was trying to persuade them, not like force them, using mind control to like force them. I was just suggesting, maybe you ought to think about the humanity of the situation. What if this was your relative, or regardless of your religion or whatever else,
Mm-hmm.
this is a human being, and that kind of thing. Just as you probably would if we were there in person, trying to tell them, hey, we got to work this out, if you were a negotiator or something. So it was kind of that kind of suggestion rather than the sharper, you will, like you could say, well, now that person is paralyzed. They can't, you don't want to do that. I didn't want to do
Right.
that kind of, or harm them in any way. I wasn't sending out like
Right. It was a question
death
of.
rays or what, not that I could do that, but you know what I mean. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
I
was,
know. I know what you mean.
yeah.
So here you grow up. When obviously you had contacts with ETs and
Yeah.
paranormal. What happened? You come back, you live in the United States. I know that sometimes for a lot of people, adolescence, there's a bump up in experiences,
Right.
whether it's the psychokinetic energy
Yeah.
that you put out as an adolescent. I don't know
Yeah.
what it is, but it's like,
Yeah.
is that what happened with you, or what happened as you started getting older into your teenage years?
Yeah, there. Well, I had a very pronounced experience with this NHI at age 6, and just
Okay.
for you and your listeners, it kind of makes sense because I lived less than a half a mile away from a Nike missile site, a nuclear missile site
Wow.
in
Okay.
Seattle, and they tend to hang around those places.
Okay.
And this was the
Okay.
command and control site, which is even more important than where they actually have the missiles, because that's what controls the missiles. So
Mm-hmm.
I was
Right.
less than a half mile away. Anyway, long story short, the people that lived above us were used to babysit the dad. As it turned out, he was a child predator. And
Wait,
I
wait,
knew
wait,
that there was
wait.
weird
The
stuff going
neighbor?
on.
Wait, wait.
Yes, the neighbor that lived above us. Yeah. And so I knew that something was wrong, and he would do. I'm not going to get into the detail, but I knew something. As a 6-year-old, I knew something was wrong. So he never
Right.
harmed me. But
Okay.
what happened is my bedroom faced their house above us on the hill.
Okay.
And one night I was looking, it was getting kind of dark, and I looked outside that window and I saw like a holographic image of a tall entity with kind of a scary looking face, kind of an alien, what you would consider a classic alien looking face with a robe.
Okay.
And and he didn't tell me his name or anything. He just communicated to me telepathically, and he said, "Don't go to that house anymore." And I said what a lot of kids would say. They see it and they go, "Why should I listen to you? You're a scary monster. Why
Right,
should I?"
right, yeah.
You're,
Like you're
and
a kid.
and then he said very wisely, he said, "I might look like a monster to you, but it's the man up there is the real monster. You have to be
Okay.
careful. People are deceptive." And I said, "Well, what about my mom? She expects them to babysit me, and I need to tell her." And he said, "I'll take care of it. Don't worry about it. She won't. You won't have to go up there anymore." And of course, I didn't. That was it. And so I consider it a rescue. And
Okay.
several of my experiences with NHIs or ETs or aliens or whatever you'd like
But
to
let me
call them.
ask you real quick.
Yeah,
Did anything ever happen to him? Was he ever caught or that neighbor or what happened?
he was apparently caught later on.
Okay.
Some people, people come forward later in life.
Yes.
So I
Okay.
think there were several victims. I think including his own children,
I was
unfortunately.
gonna say, yeah, they don't stop. So in other words, years went by before this became known. In other
That's very
words,
deceptive. I'll just give you one example of the kind of manipulation they would do without getting into a lot of detail. But he would
okay.
say, if you tell, he asked me, he said, "What are you most afraid of?" And I said, "Well, I'm afraid of the devil," because I
Hmm.
was, a kid, went to Sunday school,
Right.
afraid of the devil, and I had breathing problems. So and I said, "I'm afraid of choking to death." And he said,
Okay.
"Oh, okay. Well, if you ever tell your parents what's going on here, the devil will come and choke you to death."
Oh my God. What a horrible.
Yeah, I mean that tells you how evil this person was,
Yes. In other
and you
words,
can
yes.
imagine what he was doing to these kids. So, and
Right.
luckily, I never experienced that. So I was able to get away. But that's the kind of manipulation they would do with children. If you can,
Yes.
that is just so horrible.
Yes,
And
it is.
anyway, so I was rescued, and not only did I now know his name is Anzar, and
Mm-hmm.
he showed me a spacecraft, and
Okay.
it was beautiful. It was it was silver and gold, and it didn't have any like control surfaces, and the inside it was still a holographic image. And what was
Right.
cool is there were other kids watching this as I was watching it, like in different houses. I could kind of see they were watching too, if you can imagine that.
Okay.
And he told me, he said, "Someday," I said, "Well, I'd like to be an astronaut. I like spaceships, and he said, "Well, you work hard, maybe you'll be able to fly someday." He didn't say in a spaceship necessarily, but and
All
and then
right.
later on I became a helicopter pilot. So it's
So
funny
there you
how,
go.
yeah, and I had several other experiences. Some of them with as I like after I graduated from high school, I went on a road trip with my buddy, my best friend.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And in the books I write about it. I call him Ernie. That's not his real name, but we went in 1977. We drove to Salt Lake City, Las Vegas, to LA, up to San Francisco, and back home to Seattle. So it was this big trip.
Okay.
The first day we only got to the wilderness area of Idaho,
All
and uh,
right.
and we got to a place called Black Pine Peak. Just a perfect scenario for something creepy to happen, right? So, and we were too lazy to put up our tent, and we couldn't find the campground. We got lost on the forest roads.
Okay.
So we found this big clear, just getting dark, and we just decided to sleep in the tent.
Uh-oh. Did I lose you, Bruce? I hope I didn't lose you. If you can hear me, you froze on me.
Yeah,
Okay, there you
yeah, I
back.
think I'm back.
Okay. Okay, go ahead. So anyway, you guys stopped for the night and oh,
Is there other people? But it's the lights were coming from above and below and all around us, and I thought that is very strange. That doesn't seem like a car. What's going on here?
and out in the wilderness where it's so dark, I mean, people don't realize what dark really is when there's no ambient light.
And all of a sudden, I could, and the
Okay. You kind of freezing on me. If you can hear me, you're totally frozen and I can't hear anything that you're saying. Oh shit.
are we back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Okay, yeah. So just this scenario in this this field in the black pine wilderness of Idaho, and
Okay.
entities were around us, and I couldn't move, and I knew that there was something weird going on.
But are we talking here ETs, extraterrestrial, or something from the land?
Right, my conscious memory. That's it. And then we went the rest of the trip, but we spoke about what happened, what the details were. Oddly enough,
Uh-oh. Okay, I've lost you again. Oh,
oh, I think I'm back.
okay.
Okay,
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
and yeah, we were arguing and fighting the rest of the trip. It was a miserable trip, and we never talked about what happened. And you can imagine what happened. So,
Well, let me ask
I
you something real quick. Wait, wait.
yeah,
Because when you cut out, when you
yeah,
guys stopped that first night in that clearing in Idaho,
yeah, yeah,
right here, the nightfall, you
yeah,
stopped. What happened? Because you cut out and I didn't get that.
yeah.
So
So
here you
the
two
first
guys
thing
are
was
out there. What happened? You got
yeah, it was
lights?
dark now, and we saw lights, and we thought it was a car. It's more people
Okay.
coming up, but the lights were from like different, like up in the coming from the sky, from
Okay.
all around us, 360 degrees. It was a very weird thing. And then after that, I noticed some dark figures around the car, but I couldn't get out. I couldn't move. I couldn't even move my head. I was like frozen.
Okay.
And then I just kind of blanked out, and that's my conscious memory of that night. That's my conscious memory.
Okay.
Then I did a hypnotic regression
Mm-hmm.
with my friend Yvonne Smith of Ciro,
Yes.
and she's very good because she doesn't lead you on or make say,
Right.
oh, obviously that was alien or whatever. She just
Mm-hmm.
said the simple thing. She said, okay, you're back there. Look to your right now that you can look to the right. What's going on? And I said, my friend Ernie's gone. He's gone. He's not there. And the entities were around there, and I saw them more clearly, and that they were not human. They were very tall and
Okay.
alien looking. Although they were shadowy. And
Okay.
so I remembered that, and then I was able to retrieve those memories. So then that added to my conscious memories. Well, then I decided to contact Ernie,
Mm-hmm.
and I told him, I said, Ernie, do you remember? I started with, hey, do you remember what happened to us in Black Pine Peak? And he, oh, yeah, I remember that. We thought we saw people around the car, the lights. I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like I was drunk or drugged or something. And I said, yeah. And we argued, and he said, yeah, I'm really sorry about that. I said, I'm sorry too. But, I said, did you ever think, that maybe it has something to do with UFOs and aliens, And he got so mad at me.
Really?
He got so mad at me. He said, and I told him I was going to write a book about this experience. And he said,
Right.
you better not mention my name. That's why I call him Ernie. That's not his name.
Right. Right.
And you better not mention my name. And I said, okay. And I was on the phone with him, and then he hung up, and then he wrote me back. I called him and left a message. I said, I'm really sorry. I wasn't trying to be deceptive. I just kind of didn't want to lead you. I wanted to kind of ease you into it. Really sorry, and I won't use your name. And then he said, you know what? I do remember, and I remember probably the reason you feel bad is because you let your best friend be abducted. And guess what? They took me, and they he remembers they said, yeah, they said we got a squealer here. You think they'd never seen a pair of pincers before, like
Oh
pincers,
my
right?
God.
And he goes, and that's what I remember. And and then he never contacted me again. I tried emailing him, I tried calling him. He left me with that he was mad at me, but he acknowledged that.
So
So
let me
then,
ask him, was he
yeah,
aware that you had experienced your own version of some type of abduction yourself?
only after I told him I was writing the book and that I'd done the regression, and then
So in
that's
other
when
words, he thought all along that he was the only one?
I guess so. Yeah. But he just didn't want to talk about it, and I forced him to talk about it. It's something he
Okay.
didn't want to do, and he got a very bad reaction. And as soon as he said pincers, I remembered something because I was writing a lot of poetry at the time on that trip.
Uh-huh.
And I
Okay.
thought, I think I wrote a poem that had something to do with this. So I went back, I kept all my poems from the 70s and 80s, all the way through
Uh-huh.
to today. And in one of those poems is called I Sold Out to the Aliens.
Oh
And
boy.
at the end of the thing was, I can't remember the exact words, but it was something like they're not here to help us, something like God help us from keep us from their pincers. you know I
Wow.
mentioned pincers, and when I read that, my blood ran cold, and I go, oh my gosh. So now I have this document from 77 that
Right.
mentions what Ernie had mentioned, and he reluctantly mentioned it, and then my conscious memories, and then the retrieved memories, and I put it all together, and I put it in a story in one of my Timeless books. And so
Wow.
yeah, why he was taken, I had already been abducted before
But you
that,
know what?
so
What's really weird is I was a hypnotherapist for many years. I was a practicing
yeah,
hypnotherapist. And
yeah,
usually, because it almost sounds like he remembered, in other words, you went and you got hypnotized by Yvonne,
right,
and
right,
you brought all these things forward. But it
yep,
sounded almost like, unless he got when it got hypnosis on his own, it almost sounded like he remembered without the
yeah,
benefit of hypnosis. As a matter of
mhm,
fact, even with that disturbing recollection of the
yeah,
pincers, that's like, and I'm
yeah,
thinking that must have been because sometimes even under hypnosis, if something's really, really disturbing, even with hypnosis, we will not recover the memory. And maybe
right,
that's what happened.
yeah. I
That
think I
luckily it came out like subconsciously when you wrote that poem,
right,
kind of
right,
like an indirect way.
and
But that's incredible that you were able to refer back to it
and
after so many years.
I because it just when he said pincers, that's a really odd reference, and so I
Yes.
thought I remember I was
Yes.
writing poetry, so I went. I had no idea what it. I couldn't remember the name of the poem. I just know I was writing
Well,
poetry, and
I'm going to add, okay, now let me ask you,
yeah,
between that and your experience, it almost sounds like what these ETs are not friendly towards humans or they just don't get it. Like in other words, that they treat us, let's say, like we treat lab rats.
I think it depends on the ET, or depends on the entity.
Mm-hmm.
All of my interactions have been generally okay. There
Okay.
have been a few exceptions, but mostly okay. Mostly dealing with Anzar, and
Right.
he's been present. And there was a 1978, no, 1973. Uh, I was abducted, and that's where I was taken out of my bedroom into a craft and on a classic kind of a table, exam table, but I was levitating above it. It was very, very weird. And
Okay.
the entity that was in charge was an insectoid. I explained and I wrote in the book, it was a cross between a Jerusalem cricket and a praying mantis, something between
I
the
was
two.
gonna say like a
Yeah,
praying mantis type of.
yeah, but he was clearly a medical kind of person, and
Okay.
I had this recollection. I said, I was upset, of course, and I said, "What's going on?" And he said it was a not a rescue. He said it was like a what was the word I used? Oh, special processing. That's it. You're having
Okay.
special processing. And I said, why? And he said, well, that's all you need to know. And then he got mad at the little gray entities that were seemed robotoid to me. They weren't like
Okay.
totally living. And he was mad at
Mm-hmm.
them because they put some kind of clamp on my head that was hurting me. And he told them to take it away or whatever. And then just when I was about to ask more questions, the appendage that he had just kind of touched my forehead. And next thing I know, I was in my bed. And that's part of that is conscious memory, part of it's retrieved memory. That became very clear to me. Uh,
About how
and
old were
the
you when
whole
that
thing,
happened?
I was a teenager, so that was 73. So I would say I was 14 or 15
Okay,
around that
adolescent.
time.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And the whole thing started with my aunt. I thought it was my aunt in my room because they were visiting from Norway.
Oh, you're kidding.
And I thought, why is my aunt in my room? That doesn't seem right. It was the middle of the night.
Uh-huh.
And it was Christmas Eve too. It was like just before
Okay.
midnight or maybe after midnight, whatever. I thought, why is my aunt in my room? And next thing you know, my aunt's face is not my aunt. It's like turning into, it's morphing, And then
Oh,
there's the little guys around her. And the next thing you know, my cat, who was always with me, Tiger, jumps off the bed at it, and runs away. And next thing you know, I kind of
it's
lose consciousness, and that's the retrieve memory goes up into the exam thing.
your
And
cat said you're on your own. Sorry,
yeah,
I'm out of
yeah,
here.
he was my protector, but it came to that. I think I was on my own. So that was beyond his skills, I think, at that
It'd
point.
be like, no,
Yeah,
no.
he deals with friendly ghosts, not
Right, right. Now, like, yeah,
yeah.
this is above my pay grade. Sorry.
But then again, it was then again he said it was special processing. Maybe it was something that saved my life. Maybe I had some heart defect. Maybe there was something that was undiagnosed. Who knows?
Okay.
I guess they wanted me to be around, and I've had a lot of close calls and near death experience. So there's a reason why I got to the point where I decided I'm going to start telling all these stories. I was no longer going to be afraid of losing my job or losing
Right.
friends or relatives or whatever. I just said the time was right. That was 2016. My friend
Mm-hmm.
Gene was Norwegian American, grew up with me. We knew each other
Okay.
from little kids. He died on very young age. He was only 60 when he died of cancer.
Okay.
Came to me a month later and in a vision, which is not
Mm-hmm.
unusual for me, and
Okay.
interactive. I said, Gene, so nice to see you. And I said, and I said the most stupid thing. I said, I said, what's it like to be dead? You know, which is so stupid. It's natural to want to say it, because I was so shocked
Right.
to see him.
Yeah, it's like,
And he laughed and he goes, Bruce, if I was really dead the way you're describing it, that you think you mean, would I be talking to you like this? And I said, no, I guess you're right. There's something beyond. And he, oh, yeah, of course, you know that already, right? And I said, yeah, I do. I'm sorry. And then he encouraged me. He said, the time is right to start telling your stories. And I said, well,
okay.
what if, I might lose my job? They'll think I'm crazy, whatever. And he said, no, no, the time is right. And he even gave me the name of the book. He said, you should call it Timeless, because he said,
Okay.
where I am, there's no future, there's no past. It's all happening at the same time, which he's
Wow.
basically describing the quantum world, where
Yes.
it's all together. There's no linear time.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and he's told me all kinds I contact him on a regular basis too. And I pretty much every day I communicate with my friend Gene. And I like to mention he was an actor and he likes to get credit. So he was a great
Okay.
actor and a very funny person, a wonderful person. Like so many wonderful people you meet in your life, they go too soon, it seems
Sure.
like, but in a horrible way. But anyway, that's how it started. So then I started publishing the books and coming on, meeting nice people like yourself and telling the stories. And
And let me ask you
yeah,
something. All these fears that you had, like, hey, if
yeah.
I go public with all this stuff, none of it materialized, right?
The oh, I never went public. Yeah, during in the military, I had
Oh, well, no, I
security.
know that sometimes some
Yeah,
of these things, they're career killers, as far as like,
yeah. Oh, it's my
even
son.
if it's on an unofficial, because people sometimes think it's like, no, it's almost on an unofficial thing. You get known as that guy or
It
that person that says
yeah
something,
yeah
and
it can
nobody
happen.
ever forgets about it either.
No, it's well that has happened to me since, but it's always I'm near retirement, so who cares? I don't they'll like have some little joke on the first day of the semester. They'll, oh, and there's Bruce. He's the guy who talks to dead people. Hey, how you doing? I don't. But then privately they'll come to me. Hey, can you contact my uncle John?
You know what? That's really funny because everybody, whether it's that or people have their stories about either a
Yeah,
sighting a cryptid or a
yeah,
UFO or a Bigfoot or a ghost.
yeah,
It's like, ah, then, like you
yeah,
said, on the side, they'll say, hey, you know what?
yeah,
Just keep it to yourself. But you know what happened to me once?
yeah. I said
And there
okay.
you're like, okay. Hmm.
Yeah. And they even and remarkably after the book started coming out, the board of trustees at the college, who are not known to be really into this stuff, as far as I know,
Right.
they approved me teaching a class, a paranormal personal history class. And now
There you go.
it was
That's great.
community education, so it wasn't for credit, but
Hmm.
I've been doing that on and off since before the pandemic, and
So I bet a bunch of people signed up for that class because
oh, a
people,
ton of people, and from
yes.
18 to 80. Wonderful
Uh-huh.
people. All of them have one thing in common. They've all had these experience. Well, they all want to be able to tell their story in a safe place.
Yes.
That's it.
Yes.
And I had this big lesson plan. I was gonna, okay, this is the origins of how telepathy is done. This is all the research that's been done, and I did all this. And they call me Dr. B. Dr. B, we just want to tell you what's happened to it. And I go, okay. So I had to allow half of the class every time personal
So
stories.
basically, it turned like into a partial group therapy kind of moment. Like
Yes.
everybody sends their story.
And for me too, because I learned,
Sure.
I mean, that's the a good teacher's a good student. That's
Of
really what it
course.
is.
Of
My
course.
students teach me a lot, and these are experienced people and have faced a lot of ridicule trying to find a safe place to tell their stories. And anyway, so and then I even got the credit version of the class
Okay.
passed through curriculum, which is not easy.
Wow.
And they were like, there's people up in arms about it, and it was really pushback. But then I told them, hey, they teach this at UCLA.
And then all of a sudden it's okay.
Oh, UCLA, because we're always bending on
Yeah.
bended knee where I'm in a community college, and
Uh-huh.
whatever the UC does, we got to.
Yes. So
So
now all of a sudden it got the stamp of approval.
yeah, and it'll take about a year, and then I'll be offering a credit class, which means I'm going to get a ton of students because they're very young people are very interested, but
Sure.
they want to get their degree, so they don't have time, to take a night class
Right. That's
for
not
no credit.
credited.
Yeah, they have to work or take care of their family member, whatever.
Sure.
So this time, I'm gonna be able to offer it during the daytime and get a lot of young students. I'll still do a night class for the older folks too. So I'll
Yes.
do both. It's the non-credit and the credit. So
Haven't you
that
had people there that have never told anybody up to that
yes,
point?
yeah, yeah, and they're embarrassed, and they're
Mm-hmm.
thinking that, and then they finally feel like, and then we do little tests just to show, hey, this stuff is real, and I get skeptics in there too, which I love skeptics, by the way. I'm not talking about debunkers. I mean skeptics, just people that naturally,
Sure.
I don't think it's real. I don't know, agnostic or whatever.
Yeah.
And then we'll do the little experiment of are you being watched? And we turn our backs to each other, or somebody turns their back to you, and then you either
Mm-hmm.
watch them or don't watch them, and you do several iterations, and then they find
Okay.
out, oh, I more than half of the time I know when somebody's looking at me, the back of my head, especially the back of their head. That's what I have them focus on.
Well, you
And
know what's really funny
yep,
is that's a very typical um instance of people that have are living in a haunted house is a
mhm,
lot of them will say, I felt like someone was watching me.
yes,
And I knew it was alone, but I felt like someone was watching me.
yep, yep. There's that's a natural thing that well, because as you know, and many of your listeners probably do too, that ancient people, this was very normal to them, this stuff.
Hmm.
This, they referred to the star people and the spirit people, and they just lived in a world that where they accepted all
Yes.
that and were
Yes.
natural, and they needed it for survival. If you were in a
Right.
cave somewhere, you needed to have eyes in the back of your head. You needed to, because you have to be very aware of everything and use every sense, including the sixth sense,
Well, as a matter of
survive.
fact, today I was reading an article. They found this archaeological dig. This is somewhere in Israel or in that area. and it's quite old. And they found remains of Neanderthal type hominids and
Mhm.
modern men that, so recently that they found that the way they were buried, they were burying their dead like in a fetal position and with grave goods.
Mhm.
Sometimes that indicates like a belief in the spiritual, like the hereafter.
Yeah.
In other words, they're realizing that really ancient man had
Mhm.
some type of belief, a
Yeah.
spiritual belief
Yeah.
in what happened after the person died.
Yeah.
All right. And they were, it's really interesting, especially because they found the Neanderthal types buried there along
Mhm.
with, I guess it was some type of like, minor cemetery, but the way they were
Mhm.
positioned in a fetal position, and they found like different, what I guess, grave goods,
Yeah.
paint stuff that it was like, this is not, they just didn't lie down and die there.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. These were not mindless brutes, you know.
right. Exactly. That
Right.
the end they believed
Yeah.
that what happens till after you die, in other
Yeah.
words.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's there's so many different ways to go with it, but I did develop a theory, and it's not just my theory. There's
Mm-hmm.
much smarter people than me that hold this to be true as well. That the spirit world, the quantum world, and the alien world are all really the same thing.
Sure.
It's all where it's all connected, and through the through quantum physics. That's how scientists explain it. And I think it was the American physicist David Bohm who said that there is the subjective reality, which is the everyday interface that most of
Sure.
us we have to live in that, day
Right.
to day, and then there's the objective reality, which is the oh, what did he call it? Well, anyway, it's the objective reality, which is the quantum world. That's the
Mm-hmm.
cosmic soup where we're all connected. And then
Right.
there's something beyond that, which is whatever you want to call it, the one consciousness, the one soul, God,
Exactly.
whatever you want to call it, the one. I think
And I think
Buddhists.
that we
Yeah,
have to exist.
yeah,
How's this? In other words, in order to operate on this plane, to live, how's that? Live, whatever. You can't live in the cosmic soup because you would be too distracted. It would be too crazy.
right.
And I think that we'll go back in time,
Yeah,
even prehistoric, where you always had maybe in some places called a shaman or
yeah,
a special person that was the one that would go and do that communication.
yeah.
Because for the normies, whatever
Hmm.
the placement, the setting was, you can't. I think it would be overwhelming for most people.
Yes, it is, and I'm glad you said that because I had a friend of mine who was a psychiatrist, and he was
Hmm.
fascinated by these books I was writing. He said, "Wow, you took a real academic turn there." And I was even told I committed academic suicide by starting to write about my paranormal things. And you know, so this is what I have to do. I'm compelled to do it. Every book I write, I'm compelled to do it. It's not like I said, "I'm going to write this." It's like I have to do this. I have nothing
Right.
else I have to do than this, and that's how it gets done. But I told him, I said, is it possible that people that are very schizophrenic
Hmm.
uh, could be very, very psychic and unable to manage it? And he looked at me and he goes, that is a frightening thought, because he's medicating people that are very, very sick.
Sure.
And he said, if they can't, you're saying they can't manage it, but they can do what you say you do. And I said, yeah, because I could easily see how you could slip into madness. Once and like, for instance, I went to I'm a disabled vet, so you have to go through all the when you get signed up for their medical, you have to go through screenings. They had a mental health
Right.
screening. They gave me a form to fill out, and
Hmm.
the questions were do you see people that other people can't see? Do you hear
Oh,
other people who the other people can't hear? And
yes.
I looked at the psychiatric nurse, and I said, nurse, I'm going to put no on your forms here,
Because
but
if not,
I'm telling you that yes, I do all the time. That's what I've had it since I was a kid. And she just looked at me like I was, okay, and I gave her the form. It said no.
that is so. I was gonna say I'm
Yeah.
good. I can't tell you the truth because if not, you guys are gonna come with a straight jacket for me.
Yes, exactly. And that's part of my mom's training. There's a time and place for that. And by me putting no on there and just telling them that's what's she going to do, unless I start,
Well,
flipping out in front of her or something, but which I wasn't. I was just like I am. But I do understand how, well, just for instance, and you might have this too, that I've heard a lot of people who are psychic, have psychic gifts. They have trouble in parties, big parties,
yeah.
because it's not that I read people's minds, it's that I sense their intentions, and that's almost
Yes.
worse. That's almost worse because the mind is very cluttered, and but their
Yes.
intentions are usually very clear, and I can see that. I mean, there's the dark aura thing that sometimes I pick up on, but I
Mm-hmm.
can I can almost hear their intentions. It's like I feel it and I hear it, and sometimes they're not good, and it very much makes it hard to relax even if I try to turn it off. So I try to avoid big parties, and or I
Yeah.
will find one person that I really like and I'll take them aside and I'll just like a laser beam focus in a very deep conversation with them, until the
Mm-hmm.
party's over or until I can make a graceful exit. That's how I deal with it. But otherwise, turning it off is really hard to do. I've learned how to do it, but for social, like meetings at school and these things where there's a lot of very
I can tell. Yeah, and it's really funny because I was gonna say, I bet you that your body space is probably a little bit extra wider than most people's.
I
You know
yeah,
how we usually have when somebody that we
yeah,
don't know stands too close to us that you're like,
yeah,
man, what's wrong with you? I
yeah,
think with you, you probably have a little bit extra
yeah. I
wider.
pick up on too much, and it's
Yeah.
I think autistic people are a good example of
Yes.
they're very sensory. They live in a much different sensory world than other people do, and I
Yes.
think that
Yes.
that is also very
But then you're a teacher. I know. Yes, that's incredible.
yeah.
But
So
then
I
you're out there. You're in the it's that's incredible. But like again, the setting is different. I guess a classroom versus let's say a party. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know how
It,
I do it in the classroom? Because I was so
how?
terrified when I started teaching. I go,
Okay.
"Oh, I want to be a teacher. Great. Now I got to talk to like 80 people in a classroom. And, they're
Uh-huh.
all very smart people. They're there, they're in college, and, they're eager to learn. And I big responsibilities. So then I quickly realized they're one person, not 80 people or 45 people or
Right.
whatever. I said they're one person. I'm talking to one person. So I focus, not, I don't like stare at one person all the time. I just
Right.
see them as one person. And then
Yes.
I can talk to them in a very friendly way, in a very conversational tone like we're doing. And
Mm-hmm.
they react to it. They like it, you know.
Right.
They I'm not talking down to them or pontificating, not connecting. I'm connecting to them in a like a neighbor across a fence, or something like
Let me
that.
ask you, have you ever had the instance, Bruce, where you, let's say that party setting, we could use the party
Yeah.
setting, where like you said, you pick up on somebody and you say, that aura, that person's got something like that black
Mhm.
aura, whatever, or
Yeah.
something. And do they become aware that you're aware of them? You ever see
Uh,
them like look back at you and you're like, oh,
there is that has happened. That has happened. Even though I try to, as soon as I pick up on it, I try to,
mm-hmm.
shut off the. I I guess it's like electronic warfare where
Yes.
they use the signals to find the aircraft, and then they have jamming signals. So
Yes.
you have to jam as well. You have to try to
Right.
jam it, and I don't know exactly how that works, but I just if I sense something like that, I'll try to jam it and just kind of put up. Well, in the prison, I'll give you an example.
Right.
I pictured myself in a protective bubble. That's how I
Okay.
survived working in the prison. So what you were talking about, that space, I went beyond the space and I put
Oh,
up
sure.
a force field, if you will, or
Mm-hmm.
a protective
Yes.
bubble, and that's how I survived. And I was able to protect me inside of that
Mm-hmm.
bubble and act professionally and do my job, provide custody and control, which is what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And it usually was pretty good, although it was tested not so much in the military prison, but in the maximum security state prison, where those people are older, and all of them in one, well, in the prison I worked in, the maximum security prison, all of them had committed at least one murder. So these are the worst of the worst. They were killing and raping other prisoners in other prisons, and they brought
Right.
them there. And it
So that's
was
how they ended up at a maximum security.
yeah, they're really people who are doing outrageous harm to other people and to
Right.
themselves too, and ultimately. And
Sure. Well,
so,
some of them,
yeah,
I think they think like, especially, I don't know, depending on their sentence, if they're in there for life, they're like, they
yeah,
don't care. It's
they
like,
don't.
well,
If I kill one more person, what are they going to do? They can only
it
take.
doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're going to. I'm going to die here anyway. So, what the heck?
Who cares? Yeah, exactly. That's
Yeah,
the thing. There's no punishment that you can hang over their head,
yeah,
unless you, maybe go into solitary. I don't know, but even then,
yeah. They can get. Eventually, they have to be taken out of there, and
sure.
they're well-meaning. This is another example of well-meaning people. Like the ACLU, which I'm glad we have the ACLU. I'm not against them, but they
Hmm.
said it was inhumane for us to feed these incorrigible prisoners, extremely violent prisoners, through a book pass, because we were feeding them through there. Because every time we opened their cell to
Yeah.
let them out to eat, they would try to kill somebody,
That's
including us.
that's the part that, yeah,
Yeah,
see, and that's somebody that the
yeah,
one that make that observation is removed from the immediate
yes.
situation you're talking about.
We wanted to like bring them in there. You want to see what happens when we open the cell?
Yeah.
We have to get 3 or 4 guards with riot gear just to get
Hmm.
the guy out of the cell, and then we got to keep him separated from everybody else. It's easier just to give him his food through the until
Yeah.
he modifies his behavior and shows for a
Right.
certain period of time that he can, at least
Yeah.
follow some rules. And but anyway, it just people just don't understand the environment you're dealing with, and they have good intentions. They, of course, nobody wants to be fed, like that, but that's what can you do? You can't,
Let,
lose 2 or 3 guards every week because you're trying to,
let me ask you something. How many of those people do you, I mean, obviously they had committed some type of crimes.
yeah,
How many of those people do you really think were really, and by this I'm not excusing what they did,
right.
truly mentally ill? Like they were really,
Oh,
that's really what led them into committing these crimes.
I think to a certain extent, all of them have some degree, but we
Okay.
also, in that same prison, we had the psych wing, if you will,
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
criminally insane wing, and
Right.
that was actually more scary than segregation, than solitary.
Yeah.
Because those people, even though they're heavily medicated, some of them are still completely wild, like a
Yeah.
feral
Yes.
animal,
Yes. They don't
and
fear. There's no consequence. You're going to tell them they don't understand.
they can't
Like,
feel pain. A lot of them,
mhm. Yes.
and they try to give them so much Thorazine or whatever it was that they would be when they're out of their cells. They're like walking around like zombies. They're drooling, they're shuffling their feet,
Let me
and I'm
ask you, do you see, and
scary.
I'm glad because you have a very good behind the scenes real life experience because they've been talking about reopening some of these asylums that they used to
Yeah,
have. And I agree with it. I don't know. How do you feel about it? Because I think some people need to be, what's the word I'm looking for? And by this, I don't mean you have to be like killing people, but some people, they need some guidance. They just, if you leave them on the street, they're eventually going to fall into crime or killing
yeah.
people because just what's wrong with them is they self-medicate, with drugs, which they
It's
shouldn't.
it's sad. They're a lot of they're homelessness is a real, talking about that.
Hmm.
Most of them have mental health issues. Some very
Yes.
serious, others more, situational that they could
Right.
probably get better. Some it's just going to be chronic and they need to be institutionalized. And it's
Right.
unfortunate, but that's, they say, well, it's cruel to
No,
leave
it's
them on the
not.
street. Leave them on the street where they're just
Yes.
victims. They don't live very long. They're unhealthy. They're like my daughter's a nurse. They come in there and they're like covered. I mean, it's just covered with body
Yes.
lice, and it's just
Yeah.
that's no way for a human being to live.
Yes.
We got to
Like
clean
they've
them up.
left to their own devices. They just don't
Yeah, they
they don't
can't
take their
do it.
meds
They
or
can't. Yeah, they can't take care of themselves. They're just unable to do it, and it's anyway. So yeah,
and
and it's
most of these places, what my point is, a lot of
yep,
these places, even from before, they had what you were describing. They had a wing for individuals who were so violent,
yeah,
okay, that you couldn't even let them, that they're like,
yeah,
and let me tell you something. And I'm sure you've seen that a lot of these old asylums, they have a reputation of being very badly haunted. And I think
yeah.
so because I think that a lot of it comes from some of these people who were really, really, really disturbed. They had something with them that
Yes,
was, if not
entities.
causing it, aggravating their symptoms.
Oh,
That's
oh,
what I think.
definitely. And some of them were probably extremely psychic as well. So they're
Yes.
going to leave a signature behind that's going to be very powerful and probably malevolent, added
Oh yeah,
to. Well,
absolutely.
to give you an example, and this is, in line with, what you what you do with your show, but uh, I okay, I'll set it up. I'll try to do it quickly. I'm not sure how much
Okay.
time we've left, but
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
the I was on Coast to Coast, that show, and
Mm-hmm.
and this guy, this TV producer or film producer, contacted me, got a hold of me, said, I'd like to bring you to Chicago and test your abilities. And I took it
Okay.
as a challenge. And he said, "I think I'm doing this documentary show or this new show, and I think you'd be perfect. But I want to test you. I want to bring you to Chicago, take you to some places, see what you pick up on. I'm not going to tell you what happened there, but see what you can pick up on. I'll film it. I'll have you mic'd up." And I said, "Okay, but my wife's coming with me. I'm not going there by myself. I don't know who you are.
Right.
I don't want to end up
Sure.
in an alleyway somewhere in Chicago." So I go there with my wife, and he takes me to some places, and I'm a little bit nervous. I'm trying too hard to impress him. My
Right.
hubris took over because it was show
Okay.
business, and I thought, that often happens. It's terrible that way. But anyway, so I was getting okay, okay readings of places, and then he took me to this, and I decided I really got to double my effort. So I got a little bit lax with my protection, and he took me
Okay.
to the south side of Chicago, to a very rundown, scary part of Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And we pulled into an Aldi's parking lot, and there was like this L train, the elevated train next to the old post office, and an alleyway. As soon as I got out of the car, uh, I started seeing a like an old black and white jerky movie, in front of me. And it was all like horse and buggies, people in dark clothing
Mm-hmm.
rushing back and forth, except there was one man standing closer to me, staring at me. And he had a bowler hat and one of those curly
Oh.
mustaches. And he was just standing there like this. And he looked so malevolent. I mean, it's scary. And I thought, wow,
Oh.
who is that? And I was mic'd up. I go, who is that? Who is? And then all of a sudden, poof, the image went away. So I thought, I gotta reconnect. What's going on here? I never bothered to do my protection that we all are supposed to do, right?
Uh-huh.
So I went into the alleyway. I do what a lot of us do. We make a connection to something physical that's been there for a long time. And I
Okay.
connected. As soon as I touched this old tree, I was tackled to the ground. I mean, physically, and I'm a big guy. I'm 6'3", about 220 pounds. I got tackled like I was tackled by an NFL lineman. I mean, I was driven to
Okay.
the ground, and there's nobody there. There's nobody behind me. I was just physically tackled by something that wasn't an invisible force, right? As soon as I get to the ground, all of a sudden I feel my life force ebbing out of me like I'm melting into the ground. And all of a sudden I started seeing like people in a dungeon. And,
I know who you saw, but keep going.
yeah, no, yeah, I know you're nowhere. And they're like trying to grab me, and they're like in torture. They're being tortured, and they're bleeding, and they're screaming. He's not filming me, but I'm mic'd up, and I tell him what I'm seeing. And I said, this is terrible. And I couldn't get up. As hard as I tried, I couldn't get. And then finally, every bit of me just said, I want to live. I don't want to go there, wherever that is. I don't want to go there. So I pulled myself back up. I got up. I was injured, physically injured, my toe and
Okay.
my knee. He comes running out, and he said, we got to get out of here. I'm feeling something bad. And I said, well, I
This
definitely,
the guy that took you there is telling you
yeah,
this?
yeah, we got to get out of here. So I said, okay. And we go into the car, we get out of there. And as we get into the car, I said, you got to tell me, what is this place? And he says that this is the site, that alleyway there is the original site of the murder hotel where H. Holmes,
H. Holmes.
yeah, in the 1890 whatever Chicago World
Yes.
Fair, built this hotel that there was torture chambers and dungeons, and he killed maybe upwards of 300 people. I think he was America's first mass murderer, as far as I understand. There's
Yes,
a
they
there's a book about it, something, the White City or something. I forgot the name of the book,
right.
but he's very well known. I didn't know who it was. For some reason, I didn't know who it was. So I got back to the hotel, and I got on my computer, and I looked up H. Holmes, and up pops this picture of the dude that I saw with the bowler hat and the mustache. That is him.
And
That's
you were
him.
like, wait a minute.
I know
I've
this
I've s-
guy. Yeah, and of course, when he was in prison, he said people who witnessed it said his face was morphing into a demonic face. So I think talking about attachments or possessions, obviously
yes.
that.
Let
So
me tell you something. You
whatever.
know the one that's written books about it? I think his grandson or his great grandson,
Yeah.
last name of Mudgett, is one of the
Yes.
ones that's written extensively
Yes. Oh,
about him.
Devil in the White City. That's the name of the
Yes,
book.
that's it. That's it.
Devil in
That's
the
it.
White City. Yeah. So I don't know if it was actually his spirit or the him and the entity that possessed him or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, or some combination, but it's still there and it's very powerful. And I learned a big lesson, and this is a good lesson for anybody that's listening who wants to do these investigations or psychic stuff. You got to protect yourself every single time. And you have to make sure you don't get in over your head. I had no idea
Yes.
what was going on there. I didn't know how bad it was.
So did this guy tell you, the one that after he took you there, the one that said, "Hey, let's get out of here"? Did he tell you what was it?
Yeah, he told me it was H. Holmes, and it was
No,
the
but I'm saying that what he felt, that he himself said, "Hey, let's get
he
out of here."
he said he felt like every bone in his or every particle of his body was like moving and like he was getting all scrambled up. He said it was a very unsettling feeling. You know, he
Wow.
was all tingly and he was nervous and yeah, he said it was so it was very very powerful and it's still there. And then as we were driving away, he told me all that and I go, never I got really mad and I said, I know I'm supposed to do this, but never take me to a place that bad without giving me a little bit more heads up. But then when I thought about it later, I felt bad because it was partly my fault because I didn't protect myself. And if I
Right.
really protected myself, I wouldn't have let that happen. I would have, you need reinforcements, or in my case, if I know there's a demonic kind of thing there, I just don't go there. I don't, that's not my specialty. I don't want to, fall victim to that because it was physically and mentally draining. So, but
Oh
yeah,
no, this.
he told me, look at the people in this neighborhood. And it was a poor neighborhood, but he said, look at them.
Yes.
And I looked at them and they were all walking with their heads down and they were so depressed. And so maybe it was the
Right.
poverty, maybe it was the area, or maybe it was this demonic entity that's still
Right.
inhabiting that
Something
area.
there that
Yeah.
you know what? It was really weird because he asked because he asked to be buried for cement to be poured
Hmm.
into his I guess his cemetery plot
Right.
because he was afraid of being dissected.
Ah, okay.
But there was a rumor at one point going around that he never got hung, that he escaped the hangman's noose.
Oh, okay.
And I want to say a few years back, they actually took the DNA and confirmed that it was him, that it was him buried.
Hmm.
Because this is how devious his reputation was,
Right. Right.
that people thought that somehow or other he had made some type of, because he even kept, when he was waiting to get executed, he was kind
Yeah.
of like saying, I'm going to get away from this. And he was so devious that people thought somehow or other he figured out a way
Right. Right.
of escaping the hangman's noose. But
Yeah.
but at the
Well,
same
maybe.
time, he was also worried about getting dissected
Yeah.
because, and he said, no, pour some cement. Because remember, also, well, not that much, but even back then, they still had a lot of the people, stealing bodies from
Oh,
graves.
grave robbers. Yes.
But
Yes.
because of his, back then,
Yeah.
that they would take a lot of these serial killers, what we call now
Hmm.
serial killers, to dissect their brains to figure out like
Right.
what was wrong with this
Right.
person.
Yeah.
And that
And he
turns
was
out he was afraid of that.
and he was a doctor too. So that's the
Right. And he
yeah.
was he was
Yeah.
he was a very what's really weird is that castle, what he would do is, so that nobody could figure out what he was doing, is he would have a set of workers come in, do this work on this floor, fire them, and half the time wouldn't pay them, then bring in another set of
Right.
people. So
Right.
nobody really ever understood what he was doing in
What he was
there,
building. Yeah. What he
what he
was
was
doing. Yeah.
building,
Yeah.
because nobody was there the entire time from beginning to end
Yeah.
to
Oh,
figure
it's
out that.
so. I think in a way part of him did escape, but psychically that whatever that entity or part of him, his body might have been buried, but that got away and is still there, wreaking havoc. I think
Well,
that.
and I think some of those personalities, they truly think that they're never going to get caught.
Right. Right.
They've gotten
Right.
away with it for so long
Yeah.
that they think that they're smarter and
Yeah.
that I'm never going to get caught. And once they get caught, and brought to trial and sentenced and
Yeah.
executed, they still resistant up to the last minute
Yeah.
that this could be their end. And
It
then
was.
they,
Yeah. It was. It was a scary experience. And even when I came back, I was teaching the paranormal personal history class, and I came back and I went to class, and I had several, well, maybe three people in that class who were professional psychics, and
mm-hmm,
they took the class because they wanted to see what I knew, and but I'm not like, oh, I don't know everything. I'm just here to
right,
every, so I'm just giving kind of the background, and then people share their stories. And this one lady,
right,
she looks at me as soon as I get into the classroom. She goes, dude, there is something seriously wrong with, and she went out, she got physically ill. She went outside and I had to go after her. I said, I'm sorry, what's going on? She said, you have an attachment to you, there's something going on. And I felt horrible after that experience
right,
because it wasn't just that. There was
right.
also a very evil tattoo parlor that he had me go to where there was a murder, and I saw the dead man, and
Oh,
the
wow.
terrible things that were there. So there were some other things not as
Oh
bad
my
as
God,
those.
that sounds interesting. Let me ask you something.
Yeah.
Who got killed? The tattoo artist or the tattoo artist was the killer?
No, the guy who owned the shop,
Uh-huh.
and he was killed by some demonic bikers
Oh my
uh, who
God.
had,
Okay.
they wanted to hang around the shop, and they were trying to force him to sell, and he wouldn't do it.
I
And
see.
then one of
Okay.
them killed him up in like the upper window where he was, in the left hand side, and that's where I saw him, and that's where I
Mm-hmm.
he told me that he had been murdered. And
Wow.
there was another psychic that had been there before me who had more of the same story, but like a different perspective.
Right.
And but anyway, so it had been confirmed by a couple of psychics. Uh, but yeah, that was a scary experience too, because we went. It wasn't open. The shop wasn't open, so we went in front, and he was filming, and I was there, and I'm trying to there were gargoyles outside. It was creepy, really creepy as heck.
Right.
And I was like trying to get a sense, and I saw like a devil coming out of the wall, and in a fiery hole coming out of the wall, and I was describing everything I was seeing. And uh and then all of a sudden in the darkness appeared this beautiful young lady, but
Mm-hmm.
she had like flame colored hair. I don't know if it's like red and
Okay.
yellow and black, and it was like flames in her hair, and she had tattoos on every part of her body. I mean, it was, and she was like, "What are you doing here?" And I just said, "Well, I'm a psychic and I'm here trying to figure out what's going on." And she said, "Well, you can't come in." And she said, "You're a psychic, really?" And then she kind of changed. She said, "But yeah,
Right.
you can't come in, but that's pretty cool that you did." Yeah, I said, "Yeah." And then she said, "But you can't come in." I said, "Okay." But she had just appeared out of the darkness. And then
Okay.
she said, "It can't come in." And then she said, "Okay, all right. No, we're not going to come in. We'll be leaving in a couple of minutes." And she said, "Okay." And then she disappeared into the darkness again. And I found out the other psychic, he got into the building,
Mm-hmm.
and he was being followed around by these bikers, the ones who had killed the guy, because
Wow.
they didn't want this guy to know what happened, so they didn't want to take
Okay.
a chance. And that guy's son, I didn't know this until later. In the upstairs by that bedroom, there somebody had painted a devil coming out of a hole.
Oh, I was going to tell you, I can tell you right now what you're describing. Any amount of money that they did some type of ritual work there.
Oh
Guaranteed.
yeah. and
Guaranteed.
and then I said, I think I said there's a lot of fire in a like a chamber. And then I found out that the place used to be a crematorium there. It
Oy.
was a
Oh my
it
God.
was a mortuary at one point before it was a tattoo
Oh,
parlor in the city.
that
Yeah.
was not a coincidence. That was
No.
not a coincidence.
So then I looked up the current owner, and this is really freaky. I looked up the current owner, and it was this weird name, and I looked at the name on the title registration you could look up,
Uh-huh.
and it was like a weird name. It looked like an anagram to me. It looked like it scrambled letters. So I put it in
Okay.
an anagram analyzer, which you can do online,
Right.
and it came out. The name was something like Eater of Flesh.
There you go.
And I go, okay,
Oh,
this is so creepy. I can't even, I wrote
there
about it.
you
And
go.
I said, this is all coming together here.
Let
This
me
is,
tell you something. I'm going to tell you something, and I
yeah,
don't know. This is me
yeah,
just If
No.
you
Cool.
think that these bikers wanting that tattoo shop so badly was just because maybe it was a profitable place,
No.
nope.
They had
That
something else.
probably wanted that tattoo parlor because of what was there before.
Right. Yeah, they could tie into that and feed off, like you said, feed off that energy,
Yes,
that
yes.
and that kind of stuff. And that girl, I don't know if she was being held prisoner or she was a willing participant or whatever,
Yeah,
but obviously she was getting, maybe she was a tattoo artist that lived there. But
yeah.
that couldn't have been a pleasant place for her to live, but maybe that was her what
Or
she
they put
wanted.
her, they made her like a little sentinel.
Yeah, that could be. And
You know.
maybe she's not even completely real. Who knows?
Yeah, who knows?
I don't know. But yeah, when I
Eh,
came back, I had an attachment. So I had a friend of mine who's a shaman in the Peruvian tradition. You know,
okay,
she's an older lady. She's like 90. I think she just turned 90. Wonderful lady, and she has a shamanic school. So I said, "Yeah, I think I need some help. I had this experience in Chicago." She said, "Yeah, come on over." And she did
okay,
a ritualistic cleansing. I went in feeling not good and heavy, and when I came out, I felt like lighter than air. It was amazing. And when I
okay.
went back to class, the psychics were happy again, and everybody
It's like
everybody was
everybody's
happy.
thumbs up. You're
Yeah,
good.
thumbs up, Doctor B. Thank, good job. I said, well, it's all due to the shaman, So
Let me tell you something. Yeah, people don't realize when you go to some of these places,
mhm.
you can pick up stuff, you know, because it's just, especially if there was something repeatedly going on,
Yeah,
or there was dark rituals, or
yes,
well, in this case, this thing with H. Holmes is like, come on, it can't get any darker than that. That's like,
right,
phew.
exactly. Yeah, body count, pretty high body count there.
No, just I think just the mechanics of his brain,
Yep,
the way he thought, that
yep,
in and of itself is so dark. Because let me tell you something, at the end of the day, like you said, he was a doctor. Realistically, he was doing this, I think, for the sheer want of killing these people.
yeah, yeah,
It wasn't like, oh, just sometimes, even though a couple of times he would put out life insurances on some of these people,
hmm
but basically he wasn't really doing it for the money. He was doing it
no,
because he wanted to kill. And he killed, and what's really funny is he had no type. He would kill anybody, children, women,
right,
men,
and
anybody that
that's who I saw in the dungeon. I said, men, women, children, they all, yeah,
Everybody.
it was,
He had no specific victim.
yeah,
Yeah, no, that's a horrible guy.
yeah.
Anyway, Bruce, I want to thank you so much. It's been
Thank
wonderful to
you.
talk to you. Are you
It went.
working on any book or anything now?
Yeah, I'm working on well, I call it an anti-textbook, but it's a book that kind of, it'll be for my students when I have the credit class, and
Okay.
I call the book "Who's There?" And it's
Okay.
a history of the paranormal and including ghosts and hauntings and UFOs and all, that it's all tied together. I just use that quote from Hamlet. Who's there? That's the opening line.
Okay. All
When they
right.
see the ghost, who's there, when the guards say that. But so yeah, that's the other than my comic books, which I'm always working on, so which also have paranormal and UFO alien related themes, which is fun to explore in a fictional way, but yet it's
Right.
there's
That's the
nonfiction
idea
in there.
behind it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
So, for my podcast listeners, what's your website where they can find your work?
my full name, so Bruce, and then Olav
Mm-hmm.
Solheim .com. So
Okay.
that's
I'll
and
put a link in the credits though,
yeah, and
just in case.
Amazon too. They can look up Solheim, Bruce
Okay.
Solheim, and they'll find all my books are there, and including the comic books, so ebook versions and so forth. So yeah,
I want to wish you the best of luck. We got to talk
thank you,
again. I'll be
Marlene.
contacting you for you to come back because you've got so many
Yeah,
wonderful stories.
well,
It's
thank
been
you.
great.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you, and I think we really connect in a very
Yes.
wonderful way.
Yes, we
So
have. We
yeah,
have. Take care.
thank you. All the best.
Bye-bye. Likewise. Let's see. By the way, I was looking at all his books, but I was looking at his comic books, and there's one that I think is really, I love it. It's the Dr. Jekyll Alien Hunter with a female lead character. I was looking at that. That's real cool. I like the way his mind works. Um, but yeah, and you know what? That goes to show you, I've talked about it. You can have people that can be an analytical type, like a professor, and then be involved or in the background have a very unanalytical life experiences. How's this? Because that's just the way it works, that because some people think, oh, if you're psychic, you're all the time you're walking around going, ooh, and or if you're totally analytical, it's like you don't get it. All you see is angles and everything's got to be measured and on a list. That's not true. You can just like I was saying about how people think, oh, if you're psychic, you're enlightened and you're a nice person. And there's a lot of people that are psychic that are real jerks. All right? It's not like how's this? It's not like, oh, the gift of psychic ability, I'm gonna give it to you because you're such a nice person. No. There's people out there, and like he was saying, and even the ones either a jerk or they're just, or in some cases, some of the ones that really learn how to fine tune it, they basically learn how to use it. All right. And, because a lot of people think, well, if you're psychic or like here, like why don't you go and pick the winning numbers for the lotto or the gambling? You'd be surprised. Some of these people, it's not as easy as it seems. All right, to get a certain outcome or to see ahead of time. Let's say like winning numbers, because I think there's so much variables before that happens. But I guarantee you that on certain at certain times, certain psychics, and I think that when you have that, when you're hot, like man, I'm on a psychic streak today. My psychic is up. That the people that have that's part of their personality of that they'll hit up the casinos and they'll win because they recognize I'm gonna trust my gut. That's number one. Like in other words, they believe in their psychic abilities. And number two, I know I'm on a psychic high today. Because by the way, psychic is not like a steady stream. It's not like you're like that all the time. It goes up and down. And the ones that recognize I'm on a high today, I'm super psychic today, they act on it. And then there's others in other circumstances, and let's go with the quasi criminal psychic. Okay, you'll have the psychics again who acknowledge, hey, I'm psychic or whatever, I just happen to be a criminal at the same time, who will, for instance, trust their hunches. Like, hey, you know what? I was gonna go rob this place, or I was gonna do that, or I was gonna go there. And something tells them, don't go there, you know? Or they're getting ready to do something and something tells them, no, either this is something, somebody's there, let's say if they're planning to rob a place and they're thinking it's empty or something. Something tells them, nope, don't do that. There's somebody there. And something that how's this? That they couldn't recognize based on their five senses. But something's telling them, this is not, something's off or don't go there, don't do that. Somebody's there. You thought the house was empty, but it's not empty. Or, hey, don't go with so and so today because something's going to go down. All right. And my point being that the psychic part doesn't turn off because you happen to be a bad guy or a criminal or a thief. And a lot of times, if they know what they're doing and they recognize it about themselves, after a while, they learn to pay attention to it. Some of them will be used like the how's this, like a lucky, how people used to well, some people still do, like a rabbit's foot or something that they consider like a good luck charm. Some of them get attached to what they consider a good luck charm, but really they are the good luck charm, or the charm. In other words, they're the ones really that give them the go, green light, or red light. Don't go, don't go, don't go. And if they're smart or if they have some life experience, they don't try to extrapolate, well, why do I feel that way? Or why is that? They learn just to say no or yes. And I don't need to figure out why I feel that way. Okay. So, and that's why Also, what helps is that a lot of criminals, depending on the level of their criminality, also develop a sense of hypervigilance. Sometimes some of them have them even since they're children. That they pick up on stuff that most people just don't. They do. They do pick up on stuff about situations, locations, people that feeds into the subconscious mind. It comes out as a hunch, not all the time, but sometimes. Stuff that to other people go shit, we don't. Even though our subconscious usually picks up on that, but it never sets off alarm bells. How's that? Never sets off alarm bells. And but yeah, when he said that thing about it, oh, he went to that place and he said, oh, when that guy with the bowler hat and that big mustache, I said, oh, that's H. Holmes. Which, by the way, if you sign up for my newsletter on Substack, I wrote an article not too long ago talking about, I call him Holmes' helper. And he had a guy that worked there with him, like well, maybe you want to call it janitor. And when the police finally this thing broke about, what he had done and everything, this guy was still living on the premises. All right, which by the way was very badly built. They said that whole place, it had all these booby traps and these hidden rooms and other things, but it was very badly built because it was sloppy. He would hire people, do this part, then not pay them. Okay. But anyway, this guy stayed behind and he would basically he was the well, when this thing when this thing about him, they finally caught up with him. They came and they talked to him and he was like, "No, I had no idea, what he was doing. I just knew that, he would just have people come and go and I usually went and saw him in his office." As a matter of fact, this guy's name was Pat Quinlan, all right? And he, like I said, when all of this, you know, um, this thing with H. Holmes happened about 1895, all right? And there had already been a fire, and he lived on one of the floors with his wife and a bunch of stuff. Bottom line, he eventually, um, he moved, I think it was back to, was it Can't, no, was it Michigan or Canada? Okay, I'm sorry, Michigan. It was Michigan. He moves back there because finally this place is like, forget it. It had become so infamous, so notorious. Plus, it was falling apart. Anyway, he goes back to where they live, him and his wife were from, and he ended up committing suicide in 1914. And he left a note saying, I couldn't sleep. Now, a lot of people, he never got prosecuted for anything, but a lot of people said that he knew a lot more about what was going on there at this castle, the Castle of Death or whatever he called it, more than he ever admitted to. He was kind of trying to. So I'm not surprised when Bruce is describing this really bad encounter with what that location. All right, because he would just and he would place these personal ads. I guess the equivalent of dating apps now. Well, back then it was you would put like a little personal ad in the newspaper, and he would put all these personal ads. And by the way, which other killers have done before, looking for women like a Lonely Hearts Club kind of deal. And always, of course, was his intentions were to find somebody to marry. It's incredible to think he had women traveling over there from other parts of the country to see him. Now, of course, he paints himself as a man of means, blah, 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 blah. But when you read it, you're like, how, in other words, these women put themselves in harm's way. And some of them, even their children were killed, right? Even their children were killed. As a matter of fact, there's one story where this guy, Quinlan, the janitor, is married. He's a married guy, but he starts fooling around with one of the servants, I guess, that he had that would come and clean up and all this, gets her pregnant. His wife is up in Michigan. So this, remember, he built this hotel around the time of the World's Fair. So Quinlan's wife is saying, I'm going to come visit you because the World's Fair, blah, blah, Chicago, the whole 9 yards. So Quinlan goes to see him and says, hey, I'm in a jam. I've been fooling around with so and so, I can't remember her name now. She's pregnant, visibly pregnant. She's even told her sister, and my wife is coming down from Michigan to spend time with me here. Guess what Holmes does? I'll take care of the problem. Ends up gassing the the servant, the mistress, and the sister. Kills them both with the unborn baby. Yep. In other words, don't worry, I'll take care of it. For him, it was like, oh, a great excuse to kill somebody, even though he didn't need an excuse. But yeah, that's why a lot of people said this guy Quinlan knew more than what he let on, because you're not going to go see your boss and tell him I have a situation here, and he ends up killing your problem. All right, he ends up killing your problem for you. That right there should have told you. Uh, so, yep. Anyway, I hope you guys liked this episode with Bruce. I will leave a link to his website. He's got, like you said, you can go to his website, you can go to Amazon. Also, don't forget to sign up for my newsletter on Substack. I do have a lot of interesting articles there, plus, um, old podcasts, old videos. But you can go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com or mppellicer.com, and you're going to find links to everything there as well. Got a lot of great guests coming on, new ones like Bruce, returning ones. Talking about a lot of weird stuff. God knows there's a lot of weird stuff. Just when you think you've had enough weird, it gets weirder. Let's face it. Some of the stuff is, I don't know, like I said, that article I wrote that I read about in the beginning, which is this earthquake in Canada, or this tremors, and I'm like, oh my God. It's like, yeah, but the last time it went off, it was 12,000 years ago. It was like, okay, what did you write this article about anyway? I mean, let's face it, I'm expecting something imminent, not something that happened the last time. Oh no, because we've been monitoring it and it trembled. It's like, okay, talk about fear porn. But anyway, guys, please come back every week. Thank you for spending this time, and I will see you soon. Take care.